So the games industry is well and truly going through it as of late. There's been so many jobs lost, employees losing their livelihoods, games and projects that are being cancelled, so much art that's never going to be shown to the world, and it's just a really scary time to be within the gaming industry career-wise. And it was only just yesterday that we heard that Respawn's StarWars first-person shooter that was supposedly a Mandalorian bounty hunter game inspired by Dark Forces has been cancelled. And let's be honest, it would be very surprising if there was drama within the Star Wars gaming space, and the Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic remake wasn't mentioned in some way. And lo and behold, here we are, and we actually have quite a significant news update for the KOTOR Remake. And I say significant, it's probably the biggest development in the game's existence since it changed over to Saber. Now, this update comes from Bloomberg and Jason Schreier, take that how you will, but it goes a little bit like this. Embracer have sold Saber Interactive. Now, if you're not aware, Saber Interactive are the company that took over development of the Knights of the Old Republic remake from Aspyr in 2022. And despite what people have been saying online about the game being cancelled, it's in development hell, no one's working on it, blah 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 blah, that's not true. The game is being worked on at Saber. I mean, a guy from Saber Porto literally said they were working on it, but for some reason nobody paid any attention to that, but it is what it is. Anyway, Embracer, who are going through a significant company-wide restructuring, and who are basically trying to recoup a bunch of financial losses from a big failed deal with a Saudi company, have been closing down studios, have been closing down game development projects, and they're actually looking at selling studios that they own to recover the losses. And a very big surprise today is that they've decided to reportedly sell Saber, who are probably widely considered to be one of their top studios, to private investors for around $500 million. And they've actually made a little bit of a loss here because they bought Saber for just over $500 million in 2020. Now, of course, for those of us that don't care about Embracer but care about KOTOR, this begs the question: if they're selling Saber, what happens to Saber's projects, and what happens to the KOTOR remake? Now, this is a little bit more difficult to answer, but here's what we know. According to Jason Schreier, Saber will continue to develop the KOTOR remake as its own private company, and that despite the company being sold, development is currently continuing for the KOTOR remake as we speak. There's also no concrete information on what's going to happen to Saber's subsidiaries, companies like Aspyr, who were the former developers of the KOTOR remake, who were technically under the umbrella of Saber, who were under the umbrella of Embracer. Very complicated stuff. And so on that front, it's very likely we'll learn more at Embracer's next financial report around May sometime. And this really makes me wonder, because how exactly is this going to work? How is this going to pan out? Because to my knowledge, and I think to the gaming industry's knowledge, Embracer own the license to the KOTOR remake. So if they own the license, but they sell the studio who are working on it, who are then supposedly going to continue working on it post-sale, does this mean the license has been sold to or with Saber? It's a very strange turn of events. We know that Embracer have been desperate to recoup a bunch of their losses from this failed deal, and it wouldn't surprise me if they willingly sold Saber with the KOTOR license as part of that deal to sweeten the package, if you know what I mean. And at this point, it really could be anyone's guess as to what the hell is happening. All that's been stated in regard to this is that Saber will continue to make the game. So here's a couple possibilities as to what could be happening here. Firstly, as I mentioned, it's very possible that Saber was sold with the KOTOR remake project as a selling point, and from here on out, Embracer will have nothing to do with the Knights of the Old Republic remake anymore. The second possibility is that Saber will continue to work as an external developer for Embracer, while utilising Embracer's license for the KOTOR remake. Now, while this isn't particularly common under Embracer, there are a few games that do fall under this category. However, going down this route means a lot less money, and so it would surprise me if this was the case, because now they would then have to pay out profits to Saber directly because they no longer own them. They would have to pay out the licensing fees and the profits to Lucasfilm and Disney. They would then have to pay out a certain amount to the publisher, whoever that is, let's just assume it's still Sony, and then they get what's left. And that is a huge profit margin that they would lose on the KOTOR remake by selling Saber, while letting Saber continue development on their license, if that makes sense. But from my point of view, as I'm sitting here right now, I can't think of anything else off the top of my head that might have happened here in a business sense. But then saying that, I guess I'm not a CEO of a big company, but all we know is that Saber Interactive will continue developing the KOTOR remake. They're just now privately owned. And I personally believe the former of those two things is more likely, and that the sale of Saber Interactive has actually included the license for Star Wars and the remake, but don't quote me on that, that is just total conjecture on my part. I also think this would actually be a better thing for Lucasfilm too, because if Saber owned the license directly, then that line of communication is a lot more direct and a lot more clear. But that would completely depend on how much agency that Saber have over the development of the KOTOR remake and with the license. I've always been of the belief that the reason the KOTOR remake failed at Aspyr was because there was just too many parties involved. If you think about it, you had Saber involved, you had Aspyr developing it, you had Lucasfilm involved, you had Embracer involved, you had Sony involved, and I don't even mean on the smaller details like helping with development or stuff like that. These were all parties that had a significant say in what was going on with this game. And if Saber do now have the license themselves and possibly even publish it themselves, because they do publish their own games from time to time, you're cutting out all of these other parties and all of the extra noise, and it can just be Lucasfilm and Saber making the development process so much smoother and so much more streamlined, which is how it should have been with Aspyr and Lucasfilm. As I've reported many times before, the main issues with Aspyr's KOTOR remake stemmed from the fact that communication between all of these parties was just diabolical, and that poor communication created unrealistic expectations, differing views on how things were supposed to be made, etc, etc. And so with that said, I actually think this is a pretty positive development. Yes, I know I'm a hopeful person generally, but these investors have spent all of this money on Saber, and they've clearly spent this money for a reason. And with the issues Embracer are facing and their position in the market, they're in no position to haggle, so it surprises me that Embracer managed to sell Saber for close to what they bought them for nearly half a decade ago. And if we look at what's in Saber's pipeline on the larger production scale, you've got Space Marine 2, Jurassic Park Survival, Toxic Commando, and the KOTOR remake. And out of those four, I can only see two of them making really significant profit. And I also highly doubt that they would be willing to spend $500 million with the intent to divest any of these major projects that have already had a lot of work done on them anyway. So, yeah. This is just me rambling at this point, so I'm going to shut up now and ask you guys to comment down below if you think this is a good thing for the KOTOR remake, and if this gives you any more hope or any less hope. As always, don't forget to hit the like button, it helps me out so much, and if you haven't, perhaps consider subscribing to join the biggest growing Knights of the Old Republic community on YouTube. And if you enjoyed this video, you should check this video out. It's my comprehensive review for Star Wars Dark Forces Remaster, which released only yesterday. I'll see you there.